Hi all. Today we are going to discuss about WCF. So acronym for the WCF is WCF for Windows Communication Foundation. Let's understand why WCF comes to the picture. In last session we discussed about web services. So we'll see what are the challenges that we are going to face that we face in the web services so that we'll understand then how can we overcome those challenges with WCF. As we already discussed, the communication between applications is very important. So through service, through client, through service, through server. So anything is more important. Here, if we have in proper and robust communication, then only our application performs well. Otherwise, something went wrong. So in these scenarios, communication plays a vital role because one is hosted in one server, another is hosted in another server. There is no, interlinkation between that server to the server. If you don't have means, then definitely automatically it will be drawback for our application. So that's what our more concern is. Communication is more very important. So web services provides an efficient way of facilitating communication between applications. In our last session, we saw we are able to communicate from our client to web services. It performs well, but there are limitations with web services. The major limitation with web services is that communication can happen only with HTTP protocol. We discussed that only HTTP protocol is supported. But in current marketing trends, we have multiple things like HTTPS is there, TCP is there, Federated Binding is there. Okay, multiple things are there. So if other protocols are not supported by web services, then automatically it is one of the challenge for us. So this is first challenge. And second limitation is our communication is in simplex communication. There is no way of dealing with half duplex or full duplex communication. Means, say for example, a half duplex, full duplex, simplex means if I send a request to the service, if service is provides the response. If your service is going to take some time to provide the response, other requests are not at all accepted by your service. So means parallelly it won't accept other requests. So once it serves an earlier request, then only it is able to accept the new request. So that this is nothing but simplex protocol. So once you received a acknowledgement, then only other request is going to be considered for web services. But here, full duplex mode, parallelly you can send the data and it is going to process internally, and again it will provide an output to you. This is a parallel process. Even our WCF service is going to process a request. Another request, it means it will accept that request. So it will accept the request and it will be placed in the queue. So once a current existing request done, then the queue member will be processed and it will be sends the data to the client. In this way, this WCF works. But here, web services works with a simplex model. By using simplex model, your request and response can't handle at a time. Once request is served, then only other requests will be taken into the consideration. So these are the limitations, and these limitations are overcome with the help of our WCF. So far, am I clear?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So next is WCF overview. We'll see the what was the you know overview for our web service WCF. Windows Communication Foundation comes to the rescue when you find ourselves not able to achieve what we want to achieve using web services, other protocol support, and even duplex communication. With WCF, we can define our service once and then configure it in such a way that it can be used via HTTPS also we can use TCP, IPC, and even message queues. We can consume service using server-side scripts, ASP.NET, JavaScript, Object JSON, and REST services. Means representational server transfer, state transfer. So by using this, we can achieve. So generally, whenever we are using a web services, we can't use it in a client level. As a method we can use, but we can't use the web services as a client level. But we can consume our services in ASP.NET, in JSON, and in REST format also. So these can be, because it is not suitable. Web services is not suitable for handling of our implementations with the help of other protocols and full duplex mode, or it only supports the simplex communication model, but these can be overcome with the help of WCF. That's the reason where it supports multiple protocols like TCP and HTTPS and IPC and message queues. All these are the existing protocols. All these protocols are supported by the WCF. There is no protocol restriction and there is no communication model restriction. This can be overcome with the help of WCF. That is the reason where it is a time to know and understand how WCF will perform. Now, definition of a WCF. This is very important. So basically, this definition gives a brief idea of your WCF. Earlier WCF will be named as Indigo. By Microsoft it was named as Indigo, and then laterly they turned its name as a WCF. Windows Communication Foundation is a programming platform and runtime system for building, configuring, and deploying network distributing services. So we already saw what was the essence of the distributed computing applications in yesterday's class. Like with our last class in web services, we saw what is a distributed computing application. Means our application logic will be shared in multiple servers and they can be handled parallelly as per their requirement. Here also, our WCF is a programming platform and runtime for building, configuring, and deploying network distributed services. So prior to this, we have one SOA, that is web services. So which is one of the latest service oriented technology. Interoperability is the fundamental characteristics of WCF. It is unified programming model provided in .NET framework. WCF combined features of web service, remote MSMQ, and complex. WCF provides a common platform for all .NET communication. And one more drawback with WCF is we saw web services. Web services, we can, if you create web services, the service has to be consumed by any of the platforming environment. Like Java people consume and PHP people, .NET people, everyone can consume. But our WCF is going to be consumed by a .NET application only. This is one of the limitation at WCF level, because this was developed by Microsoft and strictly restricted to access with .NET applications only. Okay, interoperability is the fundamental characteristics of WCF. Means we can operate within our .NET platform, and it is a combination of, so it has a multiple number of features: web services features, remoting, and as well as anciently MSMQ and complex or their component object model. So all these features, they will combine and they will come up with a process that is with a WCF. Okay, this is a basic introduction and basic definition for WCF. Now let us see differences between web services and WCF service. So basically, This is a high level differences, and these differences, as a beginner, these differences will makes you a clear idea on what WCF perform and what web services will perform. So first, with web service, first one is related to the web services. Web service communication can happen only with HTTP protocol only. So in web services, but whereas in WCF, communication can happen over HTTP, TCP, IPC, or even MSMQ. So these are the communication models. By using these, we can communicate with the services. So, and next point for web services is only simplest and request and communication is possible. Means once you send a request, once your request is processed, then only it will provide the response. Once after the response, then only it will accept the other request. Here, request, once you complete your request and response, then only second request will comes. So this is the model where we work with. We'll call this as a simplex communication. So this will work with web services. But here it can be configured to have a simplex request response or even full duplex communication. No need to wait for the you know response, and it will accept other request, and that request will be in a queue. So one after the other, the request will be solved. They work in a stateless fashion over HTTP and are hosted inside a web server like IIS. So this difference, stateless, so our process is with HTTP. When you work with an HTTPS, which is secure, and this can be available in any of the ways. Okay, generally whenever we are using a HTTP web services, we have to host our services in IAS only. But in WCF, we have a provision of hosting in IAS, and as well as as a Windows service also we can configure, and even we can host we can use the self-hosting mechanisms. Okay, selfly we can host. So, but this can't be providable with web services. These are the high-level definitions, and I think which makes you a bit clarity in between web services and WCF. Next is, so in WCF, we have to understand three more components. From these three components, we have to understand multiple things. Basically, web service also have a service class. So we already saw we have a service class. Our service class is decorated with the web service attribute, and then we have a method. Our method is decorated with web method itself. Here also we have a service class, and we have an hosting environment, and we have an endpoints. So these three, under these endpoints we have it again three, A, B, C. Okay, A means address, B means binding, C means contract. Okay, again these bindings are of different types, like basic HTTP binding, WSHTTP, MSMQ, Federation, NetTCP. Like we have multiple things. Contracts also divide into multiple things: service contract, operation contract, data contract, fault contract. Means there will be multiple things that will be comprised of WCF. First is service, and other is hosting environment, other is endpoint. Endpoint contains three things: address, binding, contract. So address, okay, there is nothing differentiated with address, and bindings is differentiated with multiple types, and the contracts also different into multiple types. Okay, this we will see in this components of WCF. A WCF is composed of three components. One is service class, and other is hosting environment, and other is endpoint. As you know, web services is extension is .asmx, but WCF extension is .svc. A WCF will be extended with .svc. First, we will see service class. A WCF service class implements some service as a set of methods. So in order to implement a method, we require a class, right? So that class in WCF we call it as a service class. A class contains a class is a collection of data members and member functions. Here we are declared member function. What are the member function that is required for us? Okay. So that is nothing but our service class. And other is a hosting environment. A host environment can be console application or Windows service or Windows Forms application or IIS, as in case of the normal. So ASMX web services in .NET. See, whenever we are going to access this application, means WCF service application, a host can be, we can use that in console application, or either you can use in Windows application, web form, window forms, and wherever we want we can use it. So in case of web services, .NET is the hosting environment. Next, endpoints. So in order to communicate with our service to our client, we require an endpoint. Endpoint is plays vital role. We saw that endpoint URL in web services, that is nothing but a URL of our service, but this URL contains multiple things. Okay, all communication with WCF service will happen via the endpoint only. Without endpoint, we can't communicate with the WCF service. The endpoint is composed of three parts. Collectively, we'll call it as an ABC. Address. A stands for address, B stands for binding, C stands for contract. Okay. So generally, if you have a WCF service, your service will be like this: HTTP, localhost, so sample service slash my service.svc. This is nothing but my endpoint. This is my URL. So address means the endpoint specifies the address that defines where endpoint is hosted. It is basically URL. What are the URL that we have provided? That is defines that our endpoint is hosted in somewhere, and by using that we can consume the services like that. The people get clients get to know. So a typical address of, typical example for our address is HTTP localhost WCF service sample, and here we can make use of service.svc. Likewise, we can, our endpoint looks like. Next is binding. So binding means endpoint also defines binding that specifies how client will communicate with the service and the address where endpoint is hosted. Various components of WCF are deprecated in the following below points. So one is address, B means binding, C means contact. Means endpoint specifies how we are going to communicate with how client will communicate with the service. Okay, and where our address will be located, means where our endpoint is located, and all these things will be get to understand with this. A means address, B means binding, C means contract. Address means this is our address, HTTP, localhost, or something something. So B means binding. Okay, binding is used to how can we talk to the service. Binding represent means how we are going to communicate with the service, that will be taken care by the binding. Contract means what we can achieve with the service. Suppose I have a service method, what we are going to achieve with the service method. Are we going to perform addition? Are we going to perform any business logic implementation? All these things will be taken care by your contract. Okay. Now bindings, different bindings are supported in WCF. Those bindings are listed below. First binding is basic HTTP, and next is WS HTTP binding, and next is WS dual HTTP binding, MS Federation HTTP binding, MSMQ integration binding, net MSMQ integration binding, net named pipes binding, net peer TCP binding, net TCP binding. These are the different types of bindings. Okay, so whenever we are working with WCF, basic HTTP binding is used when we are trying to convert our web services to WCF. Suppose you have a web service application. If you want to communicate or if you want to upgrade your web services to WCF, then it is a good technique to place that in basic HTTP binding. So this is a basic model of basic communication model. Here no security is provided by default. But whereas in WS HTTP binding, web services with WS support means supports transactions. Means here we have a concept called transactions. So transaction management is there. So per call, so and as well as per session. Likewise, we have a transaction. Means once a communication is established, so our communication will, you know, provides the services based on the session. Suppose as a client, we establish a connection. So once we our request is being served, then automatically it will closes our communication connection. But in WCF, your communication channel will be available for the for your client as a session basis. So if your service is there, if your client has multiple number of requests, every request is going to be served one after the other based on the session. So once you communicated, a session is allocated for you. That session keep continue until you finishes your communication model. So by this web service WS star support, we can achieve transaction, and we can communicate with the other third-party things with the help of WS star mechanism. And WS dual HTTP binding. So web services with duplex contract and transaction support. Here duplex communication. Suppose if you are working with an enterprise-based application, if you tend that we have a multiple number of requests at same time, then it is a good technique to use a WS dual HTTP binding. So it will accept all the requests dually. So irrespective of the response model, it won't depends upon the response model. It keeps accept the request and it will paste in the queue itself. So every request is served one after the other once they completed their implementation. Once it is going to provide the response, then automatically other request is going to be considered, and it again it will process the request, and this process is in a cyclic approach. So by using this WSDL HTTP binding, we can achieve this one. And the other is the WS Federation HTTP binding. This is a federated security. Federated security means token based implementations will be there. So token based implementation, so this is one of the best technique to use a token based techniques with WS federated binding. Means token based means I have a service, I have 100 number of clients. If I provide an endpoint to all 100 number of users, they can access it, right? But I have one categorization. 10 users, for 10 users, I have to expose only 5 methods. So 20 users, I have to expose only 3 methods. 30 users, I have to expose 8 methods. And the rest of 10 users, I have to expose all methods. Like if we have such a restrictions, all these restrictions will be possible with token based authorization. Before accepting a request from the client, we can check whether the client has a accessibility to access our process or accessibility to access HTTP or to access particular method or not. If they don't have a permission, then simply will provide a message that you are not you are unauthorized to access this method or something like that will display. And so that we can restrict in this way with the help of our federated security. And other is MSMQ integration, communication between WCF application by using queuing. So means once one request got served, then automatically other request will comes to the picture. So it supports a queuing process, net MSMQ binding. So all the process are in queue. One request done means other request comes to the picture. So likewise, our process will be there. It also supports a transaction and net named pipes binding. So communication between WCF applications on same computer. Means, say for example, we are dealing in a network. So means we are in an organization. Organization has a WCF service. Means within the LAN only we can access. In this type of scenarios, so net named piped binding will comes to the picture. Means that service is going to be hosted in our local environment, local area network environment, that will be accessible who are in that local area network only. Suppose if you come and come to my home, and if I am trying to access that one, it won't accessible because restrictability will be available only within the local area network. Within the office network only you can access. Out of that you can't access. So this can be, by using net named pipe binding we can achieve this one. Another is net peer TCP binding. So here, in earlier approach, we have a computer to computer or same computer we can achieve. But here, peer-to-peer service means from computer to another computer we can achieve. Other computer can accept the request and it will forward to the main server. So means peer-to-peer service can be possible with the help of a net peer TCP binding. And other is net TCP binding. This is we used oftenly. So by using this we can communicate with any of the computer across all computers. We can communicate. It supports duplex contracts and transactions. Means parallelly request and responses will be processed parallelly. This communication model will be supported by with net TCP binding, and which is most important, we can use quite oftenly compared to other bindings. So these are the different bindings that were supported in WCF. So this is all about binding, and the final one is contract. Contract means the endpoint specifies see contract. What contract will defines means contracts will defines what services is going to be does for us. Means what is the use of you know a particular contract, or by using a web method what we are going to achieve. This will be defined by your contract itself. So the endpoint specifies a contract that defines which method of service class will be accessible via the endpoint. Each endpoint may expose a different set of methods. So every endpoint will expose a different set of methods. This is going to be defined which method of the service class will be accessible via the endpoint. So I have a multiple number of methods, right? So if you declare all the methods, it doesn't mean that all methods are accessible for all clients. So suppose I have a three categories of a clients: basic, and as well as premium, and other is ultra premium. Basic client I will provide only basic methods. So ultra means I will provide some of the more number of features compared to basic, and ultra plus or something ultra pro, then I will provide all services which are available with me. So when compared to basic and compared to ultra, multiple more number of services will be available. Like see how many methods are exposed to the endpoint URL. Those things will also provide some information by using a contract. These are all about ABC, address binding contract. So now these contracts are divided into four basic types. One is service contract, other is data contract, and other is message contract, and other is a fault contract. Okay. So generally, whenever we are going to declare a service, we have to decorate that service with service contract. So here in our web service, we have a whenever we have a class, we have a method web service as a that method has some declaration, that is web service. So whenever we are using method inside that service, we are decorating with that web method. So similarly, if we have a WCF service, the service class will be decorated with the service contract. Okay, and method will be defined, and data members will be defined with the data contract, and the messages will be custom classes will be declared with the message contract. And if you felt that there will be an exceptions in your application, If we handle that exception, then we can make use of a fault contract. Now, we'll see what is a service contract. Service contract defines the operation that services can provide. So, what type of operation that will be provided by your service, that will be defined by your service contract. For example, a service provide to know the temperature of the city based on the zip code. This service is called as a service contract. Suppose I constructed one service. My service is going to provide an temperature information based upon the location that we are going to pass it to the service. It will be created using the service and operational contract attribute. We have to use the service and operational contract attribute. Operation contract will be available once you make this one. This will be accessible to the outside of the world. Another is data contract. Data contract describes the custom data type which is exposed to the client. Say for example, I create my own class. I'm returning my own class as a input method or output method. At that point of time, we can make use of service contract. So I have a class. My class name is my EMP. My class contains four properties: employee name, employee qualification, employee designation, and employee contact number. These are the properties which are required. I want to bind the data with the help of my database, and I'm going to return my class as an output. So this we can call it as a custom types. So if we are going to use a custom types, these custom types will be supported by our data contract. Okay, all the data types which are defined, and all the information which we are going to pass to the service, and all will be taken care by this data contract. And message contract, default SOAP message format is provided by the WCF runtime for communication between client and service. If it is not meeting your requirement, then we can create our own message format. Suppose if you want your message in your custom way of implementation, then definitely we can be used a message contract. This can be achieved with the help of message contract. Means by using message contract, you can define, you can declare, and you can provide your own message contract format, and then message contract format will be available to you all your endpoints. If you want to do your custom implementation, then make use of your message contract and you can achieve the same. And other is fault contract. Say for example, we developed our service, so means WCF service, we might have a runtime error. So we doesn't know, right, when a runtime error will encounter and all those things. So if you have any doubt that maybe my services will end with an error at any point of time, it's not a doubt, it's quite obvious thing. Sometimes it will lead to an error. So in order to handle these type of situations, so we can make use of fault contract. By using fault contract, we can define a strategy mechanism with the try catch, and we can overcome the runtime errors. We can handle the runtime errors. So unnecessarily we don't want to, you know, end up our process without declaring a proper fault contract. Suppose the service is consumed is not working with client application. I want to know the real cause. Generally, we don't know what will happen. If we have a try and catch blocks, we can log what will be the exception, what might be the reason. So all these things. So I want to know the real cause of the problem. How can I know the error? For this, we are having a fault contract. Fault contract provides a documented view for error occurred in the service to the client. This helps us to identify what error has occurred. So why it has occurred. All these things will give a fix, and again we'll provide the updated version of WCF to the client itself. So that we can make use of a fault contract. In this way, we can work with the contracts which are available in our WCF. So basically, WCF morely focus on ABC address binding contract. So this was the introduction related to WCF. So far, any doubts?
No, sir.
Okay. So this ends our first session. and we'll see the practical session in next coming video. Thanks for listening.